When we moved here to Oakdale 8 years ago, we were fortunate enough that the Oakdale Livestock Market was available for sale. And when we came to Oakdale, the community just welcomed us with open arms. And I just feel very fortunate that it's 2015 and we're still in the livestock marketing auction business. So we're very happy to be here in Oakdale, and the facility that Mr. and Mrs. O'Brien had built in the 60s is still here. And sure, we've had to update things and change a few things, but all in all, it's still the same yard. It's still the livestock marketing facility that Pat and Lou O'Brien had built.
The cattle business is really up and down business, you know. And most of us, when I started with nothing. For the auction yards were stockyards. Like Stockton had one, San Francisco had one, LA, and of course they had them in Omaha and Chicago and all over. They didn't have auctions. My dad tells about starting up out of Angels Camp and go by one guy, might have a bull for sale, buy the bull on horseback, they'd be on horseback. 2 or 3 old fat cows, go to the next ranch, buy 3 or 4 more, go to the next ranch and drive them to Stockton, to the slaughterhouse. That's what they did in the 20s. In the early 30s, they ended up with kind of bobtail trucks, because I remember riding out with an old white and just canvas curtains on the side, you know, for winter and whatnot. And you could get about 8 or 10 big cows in there. I started there probably late 1948. Jim Ireland owned the yard when I went to work there. And he liked to preach when he was on the auction. He was always preaching to the crowd a lot. When the first 2 or 3 times I went there, I think I was taken off scale. And then I started working the ring, taking bids. And then I started trading with them. But it really helped all the people who had little bunches of cattle, because they had to either take them right to the butcher's slaughterhouse, you know, or stockyards. And this way, you give everybody a chance to bid on them, and you get more money when they only had one guy maybe to trade cattle.
My mother and dad were living in Oklahoma, and my dad was in the cattle business back there. When the drought hit back there, they lost everything they had. They come in and took all my dad's cattle. The federal government did, and give him $13, I think they had for some of them, and $11 for some of them. And then they shot them right there on the ranch and buried them. They didn't even take them off the ranch. My dad came first with his youngest brother, and they came to Imperial Valley. I went to work for a big ranching concern down there. He told the fellows there, he says, "I'm not going to stay here and work for wages any longer. I'm going to make my own way, my way." He decided he wanted to go into the auction business, so he bought the auction yard in Newman, West Side Auction, and that's when he really got started in it. After a few years, he knew Jim Arlen that owned the Oakdale auction yard, and he liked Jim, and so he talked to Jim about buying the place, and he bought it. He bought the auction yard.
He was always looking to better himself. After going through what they went through during the Depression, he didn't want to get like most people that went through that, he wasn't going to go through that again. And so he was always looking for a way to make money. He always had a backup plan. He started the yard, and he was running cattle. He had cattle on a feedlot. He was doing hogs at the same time. He never did just one thing. He was always going to be prepared.
I think he was, in the truest sense, your old-time Western, when cowboys were cowboys. I mean, he lived and breathed that lifestyle.
Several times I can remember him saying, the two most important things in your life is going to be your word and your good name. And if you don't have those, you will never be successful. You can't talk about one without talking about the other. They were a team. Grandma was the backup. If she needed to, unload the cattle off the truck, she did. If she needed to tag the cattle, she did. If she needed to get out there and help brand the cattle, she did. She did whatever was necessary.
My grandfather had a stroke in 1968, and it was a pretty severe stroke. It left him unable to talk, unable to move. After, a few months and some therapy, he did eventually get back up on his feet, and he was able to move, and he really struggled to keep going on the ranch. But his doctor kept telling him, Jeff, you gotta stop. You're gonna have to get rid of the sales yard. So consequently, here comes this gentleman from Southern California, Pat O'Brien, and he wanted to lease the sales yard.
The reason I went to work there is because they needed a bookkeeper. I didn't know anything about auction business, but I was hired on the spot, and that was in 1966. I really enjoyed working for the sale yard because it was so different. It was, and so much money involved. It was unbelievable. I was used to writing checks $2,000, $3,000, and now I'm writing checks for $40,000, $50,000, $100,000. It's so different. After I've been there about a year, Pat O'Brien came up from San Jacinto, where he had a sale yard down there, just came up to buy this sale yard, or the lease from Hollis Jeffries. He was very friendly, and he liked to do business. He liked to get on a personal basis with everybody. And he would go out and talk to all the ranchers and visit with them, and he was very friendly and very knowledgeable.
I heard about Pat, so he bought my calves and told me he needed some more calves. So I happened to have a friend that had quite a few calves for going to sell. So I introduced Pat to him, and Pat bought his calves. When we got done shipping the calves and everything, about 2 weeks later in the mail came a check for $500. And it was from Pat O'Brien. So I asked Pat, what was this for? He says, that was a finder's fee for finding me those calves. I says, hell, Pat, I could find you lots of calves. We'll go back to San Jose where I used to live, and I'll show you all kinds of people that got calves. After a year of it, one day I says, Pat, we got to go look at some calves, such and such. And he says, well, you go look at them yourself. You don't need me, and if you like them, buy them. But that's how I got started buying cattle. It was through Pat O'Brien. He was a very honest man. Good personality, was great. He liked everybody. Everybody knew him. And like I say, he was very honest.
Well, he realized that the sale yard wasn't adequate over there, and it had a lot of things wrong with it, as far as like if it rained, it'd get mud holes all over. And then there was too much cattle trucking if he stayed there, so he knew he had to get out of town. So he bought the property out on Albers Road and started building this sale yard. Here it just seemed that we had so much space and so much more corrals. And it was really nice. Pat O'Brien was a success because he went out and visited all the ranchers and talked to them and told them how the business was going and how the market prices and all that stuff. But he just kept a close contact with everybody.
Oakdale here, people like Pat O'Brien. You like Pat O'Brien, they brought their cattle to Pat's sale. And if there was cattle that were to be bought and sold in the country, if you liked Pat O'Brien, they called him, and you went somewhere because somebody did a good job and you liked them.
There was several livestock markets throughout the county, and there's just a few of the markets left. So we're feel very fortunate that we're one of the few that is still family owned and operated. If we can give a service that these customers, as being consigners and buyers, also being our customers, the service that they want, then we can draw the respect of the consigners and hopefully improve our business, which is marketing livestock.
If God came down today and said, Brenda, we're going to let you go back anytime, any place you want to, tell me where you want to go, I'd say take me to Oakdale Auction Yard.
I think that the place was needed here in Oakdale, an auction yard, and it really did a lot for the economy and Oakdale itself.
We enjoy livestock, being with them, working with them, and I get to work with people. And it's the kind of people that I like, the people that aren't afraid to get their boots dirty and know what it's like to get up early in the morning and go to work.